Well, hello, you magnificent bastards. Welcome to another episode of Working Musicians with your host, that's me, Dris Organica. But actually, my name's not Dris Organica, but fuck it. What the hell? You don't need to know who I really am. That's unimportant. My name is Dris Organica. And I have yet another podcast to share with you. Yes. Man, I'm so excited. This is just such a great day to be alive and be an American. I tell you. I'm playing around with my new preamp some more. I've got everything setting up. That's the best signal chain I've ever had. This thing is cool. Everything's working great, you know. It just doesn't get any better than this. It just doesn't, you know. And I'm in an interesting position right now. I got an interesting proposition for myself, and for those three of you listening. At this moment, I have to change my sleep schedule because you may not know this, but in addition to being a musician, I am also like a manager of sorts, right? I manage things. I am a businessman, right? And it's hard. If you were to look at me, you wouldn't say, oh, wow, that's a businessman who has a degree in accounting. I don't look like that. If you were to look at me, you'd probably think, oh, this guy has a degree in chopping down trees with an axe. Kind of got that Paul Bunyan thing going on, even though I'm not very big. But other than that, I look like Paul Bunyan's little gay brother. I guess if I had to be perfectly condemning and honest with myself, you know, Paul Bunyan's hipster gay brother, or sorry, not gay, but because everyone these days is either gay or racist, but Paul Bunyan's hipster brother, you know, kind of metro, but I'm not metro at all. But if I had to be totally honest, compared to Paul Bunyan, I'm a little metro. Yeah. Even by Texas standards, compared to Paul Bunyan. But at any rate, so I'm in I have one of these career paths where even though I manage a large business, which is, you know, $100 million a year business, the problem is it's one of those things where like the majority of like 80% of my labor force works overnight. I'm not in a position where I should work overnight all the time. It doesn't make sense. But every so often, you know, I think it's a good idea. I mean, I could get away with not ever doing it. Nobody would stop me or say, hey, what's the deal? But I like to go overnight just to show the team that I care, you know, and to just kind of see things with my own eyes. You know, otherwise it's just you see things, you have to put your earlobe to the ground and take people's word for it. And I don't like doing that. And plus, I like working overnight. You know, it's maybe not a long-term career thing for me, but I did it for years and I don't mind doing it. But as a result, I'm working overnight tomorrow night, so I got to change up my sleep schedule a little bit, which means I need to stay up really late. So I figure, hey, I've got a new preamp. I've got nothing but time. I've got a beer in one hand and a cup of coffee in the other. I've got episodes I'm uploading, episodes I'm sharing, episodes I'm recording. I mean, I've just got a whole like podcast factory going on right now. I'm just going to kind of rock out with my cock out. I'm going to do a podcast till I drop. No, hell, why not? What else am I going to do? What else am I going to listen to other people's podcasts? Psh, nothing compares to this one. That's sad. You know, you'd think there'd be better podcasts out there, but there really aren't. You know, it's just me. It's just me. There's nothing else to it. I'm just talking behind a microphone. Yet it's more entertaining than the majority of the shit out there. It's pathetic. Somebody really needs to step up. I mean, I'm doing the best I can. I mean, I'm doing the best I can. But this is all I got. I mean, this is all I can do. May not be just, but it's all I can do. It is what it is. Yes. Yes, indeed. So, while I'm here just basically killing time and sending out podcasts, it's kind of funny. Here I hadn't done a podcast in like 4 to 6 months, and now I've got like 15 of them that come out in the course of a week or 20 or who knows. You know, the sky's the limit at this point. But I just know I definitely got back up on it. And I think part of it is because I finally got some time again. I'm out of the holidays. In my business, you tend to get real busy in November and December kind of chill out after that. But, it is what it is. But it's just something I want to, this is something I want to do. I'm enjoying this and I feel like I'm good at it. As a radio personality, even though this isn't really radio, but you get what I'm saying. As a podcast personality, I think I'm starting to get pretty good at this. I'm enjoying it. It's therapy for me. I get to use my studio gear in a way that I ordinarily wouldn't. And I've got all these mixing boards and all this stuff set up, and it just feels cool. If you're a guy, you get it. You get it. You know what I mean? This is like a 16-year-old's wet dream. This is badass, and I've got all this time I got to kill because I got to stay up so I can adjust my sleep schedule. I need to be up till like at least 4 a.m., preferably 6, but at least 4, because just so I can get transitioned. Otherwise, that first day working overnight is killer. There's just not enough caffeine in the world, Coffee. So I was going back and I listened back and I realized that, my episode about podcast learnings was pretty shitty. Man, had I had a lot to drink that night, and I'm not going to apologize because I think it's, if you like this podcast, then that's just part of that's just, every rose has its thorn, and that's just kind of what comes with it. Don't get me singing now, but every rose has its thorn. And, if I'm going to be drinking Miller High Life throughout all these episodes, you're going to expect there's going to be a few moments where I have a hard time keeping it together. It's not easy. It's not easy doing this, much less imagine drinking 8, 9 Miller High Lifes and then attempting to try to host a podcast. That's what I call skill. Even though I self-destruct and sabotage myself, this is a skill. But I realize, there's more to this podcast thing than I think I just barely even scratched the surface. All I really did is just talk about some things I'd learned from listening to other people's podcasts, and it really, went on some wild tangents there. So I'm going to start with the basics, right? I'm going to talk about what you need to know if you have the Jones and the desire to do your own podcast. Because, it's kind of a weird thing. I've got all the technical knowledge it takes to record a podcast because this is something I enjoy. This is a hobby of mine. I do this a lot. I record. I've got the gear for it, right? But even that said, there were some challenges that I had to face that, it made it very difficult to set up a whole podcast and a show and a website and all that stuff. There was a lot of research that went into it because, I'm not a web programmer. I don't know a lot about making internet sites and hosting source episodes and material. I don't know how this all works, but yeah, I did some research, and I think, but at the end of this episode, the layman, somebody who comes in who doesn't know a whole lot about this stuff, even though I knew a lot about how to record in a podcast, that wasn't a huge challenge for me. As far as the technical side of things go, getting it up and running, that was a challenge. And I had to really learn and research and spend a lot of time on this. And it's one of those things, once you get it up and running, it's easy. It's real simple, but it takes time to get it to that point. And I think that if somebody were to listen to this and just kind of follow my steps, I think a lot more people could do this. Now, the problem is with a lot more, when you make information very readily accessible and you really give people, paint by numbers of how to do things, makes it easy for people to do. The problem is this isn't for everybody. Just because you like podcasts doesn't mean you should be podcasting. Doesn't mean even I should be podcasting. Although if I really thought I was that bad, I'd stop. Maybe I should. But the feedback I've gotten is that it's not bad. I've actually got people who want to do this with me. The problem is working this out with them and making it work for me tend to be very challenging. So, who's to say? I've been talking with some people, and it looks like perhaps, in the not too distant future, I might start getting some guest personalities on the show. And who knows? Maybe it'll be one of those things where we get together more often, and more of these episodes will have another personality. I think that would be great, because I know some very entertaining people who have a lot to say on the topic of working musicians, because hell, these are working musicians. These are people who actually are musicians who make their living as being musicians, I know a lot of people that'd be fun to have on the show, but the problem is making it happen, it'd be cool in theory, but making it happen is very difficult because, either they've got to come to me or I've got to come to them, and I got to bring a bunch of shit, and you got to have a reliable internet connection. And of course, musicians never have good IT, wire internet. So their computers are always pieces of crap because they're broke. That's just how it goes. Most musicians are broke. And so it becomes very challenging, and maybe I'll scratch the surface on some of the things that can be done. It's not rocket surgery of what it takes to produce a podcast with other people, but I'm just going to kind of talk about, for the most part, what it takes to get one up and running and what you need to know based on what I've learned and observed from, being 20 something episodes in, right? Not that that's a huge milestone, but most people don't make it even this far. And I've already doubled / tripled, quadrupled as far as most people go. Most people don't even get to 10 episodes. If you can get to 5, that's great, but most people don't even get there, and then even fewer even get past 10. And I'm on 20 something. I don't even know. I've got 20 something uploading, and there's a lot that I've done that I decided when I was formulating the show that never quite made the cut. Now I've kind of got the idea down, but one thing I guess I'll start out with is, and this is more of a broad, overview, big picture kind of thing, which is really what the first part of podcast learnings was about, is more so you need to appreciate podcasts, and you need to learn a little bit about podcasts and have an idea of what they are, what they're about, and how it works, and the longevity of it, and just, not being too niche. I realized how many times I said niche in that episode. Now that's kind of bad, but I'm not about to edit it out. Hell, give me $1,000 and I'll go and edit out all the times I say niche, but outside of that, who cares? But one thing I think, just to kind of tie that in with what I'm about to talk about, is you need to have a pretty good idea of what your formula is going to be, right? And I kind of did some brainstorming, and I wrote down a bunch of ideas of things that I could do on a podcast show that would be interesting. And of course, I borrowed ideas from things I'd already heard and witnessed from other shows, kind of got some ideas on paper and just started, what can I readily do, And what I found out real quick is that being there, it's real easy to look at this, and think of, pie in the sky ideas. Oh, it'd be so cool if I could do this, that, or the other thing. But I think the big thing is focus on what you can do, right? And if what you can do is not good enough, then you're going to have to do some work to make it good enough, right? But you have to focus on what you can do consistently. I was real tempted to bring some other members on this show, and I may still in the future, right? But the problem is I can't rely on other people consistently. I can rely on myself. And to be perfectly honest, if other people really invested in this, sure, I'd make the time, hell, I write my schedule. I could figure it out. Somebody might get mad at me, but the point is I can make the time for it because I'm at the liberty where I can write a schedule. I can leave when I need to and do stuff, but it would be very difficult because sometimes my work demands are just ungodly. I'm not even kidding when I say there have been times where I've worked for a month and a half straight, no days off, working 12 to 14 hours a day, sometimes more. You know what I mean? It's just when you have that kind of stuff go on in your life, and it doesn't happen often, but there are certain times, and granted I get paid for it, but there are certain times in my life where that's my reality. Good luck trying to even just maintain a life yet podcasting. And it's one of those things where I apologize. There was a period where that happened and I completely stopped, and I shouldn't apologize because you're not paying for this. So who gives a shit? But the point is, it was just, I couldn't rationalize and justify trying to do a podcast when I've got things at my life and my personal life that are just falling apart because I have no time. It's like, I need to mow the lawn. My wife needs help with the kids, I need to change the oil in the cars. There's just stuff that you have to do just to be functional. And sometimes, I can't even be relied on, now generally I'll know when those times are coming. It's not like a big surprise. Hey, you're opening a new location for your business. Well, guess what? that's going to take a lot of your time and resources, like opening a big plant. You know what I mean? Guess what? Things happen, come up, and that's just, you know, it's going to be like that for a few months, right? But as they say, that's why I make the big bucks. Oh yeah, giggity. But so I thought about bringing other members on, and I just realized that, you know, maybe I could add some here and there, and maybe in the future I'll do that more often. And I'm actually working on it, but that's not something I can rely on, and that's not something I can plan on. What I can do is do things myself, right? So it's a lot of it is, you know, whatever you do, make sure that it's something that you can do consistently with that, and you're not having to rely on other people or other things, you know, outside sources that could throw a monkey wrench in your operations. Because if it's something you're really passionate about doing, you know, you don't need anybody else. You can do this on your own. Trust me, I'm a Jedi. You can do this. You have the heart of a champion, the eye of a tiger. You know, you are Excalibur. You just point yourself in the right direction and you will whoop ass and take names, right? That's, you know, that might be a little over the top. But you know what? There's nothing wrong with having an air of confidence about what you do and realizing that you can do this on your own. All right, but the big thing is, you got to really play around with the formats. Go ahead, just get out there, get on your cell phone, just whatever. Expect the audio quality not be great, but just try to make a full episode, right? And see, okay, well, what went well, what didn't work. And what I think you'll find real quickly is you're going to need to change how things go, the format, the layout of the show, right? And don't get bogged in the technicalities. But a big thing that you'll realize is, this is what I realize is that I got real nervous behind the mic at first. It's like, I'm not talking to anybody, you know, but I'm nervous. The only one who hears me is myself, and I'm nervous behind the mic. I'm stuttering, saying, you know, making weird noises, and it's a learned skill. You know, my first, you know, few episodes, even, you know, up until about 10 episodes ago, they took a lot more editing. Now, I just go straight through it. I don't even have to edit it. Once in a blue moon, there's an area where I stop, pause, and I started in the wrong place. Little things, but I really don't have to do any editing. It used to be that this show would take a lot of my time to edit and get sounding good, but because I've got it figured out and I know what I need to do and how I need to record it, and I've kind of got the layout figured out, it's pretty simple. You know, it just takes me as much time as it does to record it, stop it, render it, upload it, write a description, put it on my website. Not a big deal. However, that's now. And there's a lot of times you just have to be just real critical on yourself, and it's kind of hard. I realized initially that I said and a lot and would just make weird lip smacks. And one thing that's cool is that it kind of causes you to be a more polished public speaker. I can honestly say that I feel so much more comfortable getting up in front of people and talking to a large crowd now that I've done this podcast for 20-something episodes, because I've gotten a firsthand experience of listening to myself back under a microscope. And I found out that there is a lot of things I do when I talk, just in normal conversation, because in reality, this show is just kind of a conversation. And there's a lot of things I do in a normal conversation that aren't very pleasing to the ear. And so I think it really helped me as a conversationalist and just as a communicator by realizing that it's not good to say, or get sidetracked and talk in circles and, you know, hey, I realize in my episodes, I still go, you know what I mean? But hell, they're 45-minute to an hour-long episodes, and I'm sitting here, you know, I take the occasional swallow of beer or coffee, in this case, coffee, right? And they're usually at the end of my day. I work pretty long days, you know, but I've noticed that, you know, every so often I got to clear my throat. You know what I mean? I could edit it out, but whatever. Maybe if I were to be really smart, next time I have to do that, I'll do something to where I'll move much farther away from the mic, cover my mouth to where you don't hear it so much, and the gate will basically be able to block it out. But when I go, and I'm, you know, 2 inches from the 4 inches from the mic, ain't no gate in the world going to stop that without crushing my vocals or my dialogue, right? But a lot of the things that make your dialogue better is just your ability and skill as an orator. The better you can talk, the better your dialogue is going to sound, the easier of a time you're going to have. If you're back behind the microphone and all timid, and you're nervous, it's just going to be obvious. The sooner you feel comfortable, more comfortable behind the mic, and the more command you can take of your episodes and show, and you're not having to constantly second guess yourself, the better off your show is going to be and the more entertaining it is. The problem is it's a skill, and you will get better in time. I've gotten much better in this. I just basically say, hey, what's the title for an episode? Okay, shoot, let's go. I think about it for a couple minutes. We got an idea or two. Let's go. These are kind of off the cuff, and I feel good about it because I think that this is something I can do continually because I don't have to put a great deal of effort into it, which is something that kills a lot of podcasts. They put so much effort and time into their production value and making it this thing that it really isn't. It's like, realize a radio show like you hear on the radio, your morning radio show is not the work of one person. It's the work of a large or semi-large team. There's a team of people who have a big sum of resources who get paid to do this. This is their job. This is likely not your job. And so if you do something that takes you this Herculean effort to put out, that's great. I commend you. I applaud you, but realize it's not going to be something that will stand the test of time, And I've heard some people put out some very good shows, it's great. They've got all this production value, but at the end of the day, it really didn't matter because they're just putting lipstick on a pig because they weren't very entertaining and they were kind of hard to listen to. Yeah, there was a lot of, razzle dazzle, but once you got down to it, it wasn't that entertaining. But the production value was fantastic. Hell, if I had it, it'd be phenomenal. But I'm not going to spend the time and effort into that. So, you will learn a lot just by doing it and practicing. And I think that's the honest truth is not everyone is going to be as good at this. But if if you are passionate about something and have a good skill for it and aren't afraid to work at it, you will get better as an orator and as a voice behind the microphone, right? So I think the big thing that you have to think about is what are some things that you can do to be a better speaker, right? And I was real tempted to start talking into how to set up websites and this and that, but I really think that stuff is so trivial compared to what I'm talking about right now, because the truth is, with cell phone technology being what it is, you can just bust out your cell phone and record it. And the audio will not compare to what I've got right now. But to be perfectly honest, as long as it's passable, it doesn't matter. As long as it's just not completely obnoxious and it's somewhat decent, it really doesn't matter. It doesn't take a whole lot of overhead in your audio signal chain to make this good. What matters the most is really, I would like to say what you have to say, but in reality, I think it's what you have to say, but even more importantly, how you say it. And I think what will bother most people who start out is just how bad of a speaker we are without some practice and polish. And there's a few little tips and tricks I think I can give y'all that'll help, because I know I've had to learn this the hard way. You ever listen to the presidential debates? And I noticed Donald Trump was freaking terrible about this. He always would breathe in real heavily, and you can tell he didn't have real good control over his breathing, and he was always making these weird noises like, and Trumpolingus, grab him by the vagina, that kind of stuff. Nobody respects women more than me. I love women. In fact, I love to Trumpolingus as much as the next guy. Then afterwards, I take a Tronal dump. It's funny. There's Urban Dictionary. It had a bunch of funny words that had to do with Donald Trump, and Trumpolingus was one of my favorites. But not to say I'm taking sides. I think Hillary's a real bitch too. But I just thought I just got a kick out of some of the Urban Dictionary Trump quotes. Very entertaining. But the point me taking the Trump digression, or the Tronald dump, so to speak, and I just want to say, hey, if I would have voted, I probably would have voted Trump over Hillary. So here, but in me saying this, I'm not very political. I don't care. You know what I mean? I tend to vote Republican if I vote. You know what I mean? So here, but I'm not here to bash Hillary. I'm bashing Trump because it's funny, you know, because I think he's a real piece of shit. But at any rate, the point is, it's not so much what we say sometimes, it's how we say it. And I learned, and if you go back to my earlier episodes and go to now, you can tell that definitely I've gotten better at this. And it's not just because I'm some amazing orator. It's just, it's real obvious when you listen back to your episodes. It's like, I noticed I had a tendency to say, you know, do these big, long run-on sentences. And then at the end of that, here I'm talking about a big, long run-on sentences, and then I'm really running out of air support. And then as I get towards the end of my sentence, I realize that I have to stop for a second and go, and then say what I wanted again. And then, you know, it's just hard to listen to. And I realized that there was all these times when these, and you know, it's one of those things, I could spend all this time editing it out, you know, sure. And adding a little gate helps. You're going to have a little bit of lip smacks and some sibilants and some mouth noises. I mean, that's to be expected. If you want to get rid of it, then move further away from the mic. The problem is if I do that, then I'm going to pick up a lot more room noise, and my room's not very well treated. And then it's not going to sound like a radio DJ thing. Typically, the radio sound is being fairly close to the microphone to get some proximity effect. And as it stands, I'm not exactly using a broadcast microphone. I'm using an Audix i5, which is basically very similar to a Shure SM57. And it's a small diaphragm, basically a dynamic microphone. And it works fine. It's great. You know, no, I have no complaints. Would an SM7B be better? Sure. An RE2020? Sure. A Sennheiser MD421 be better? Sure. They're large diaphragm dynamic microphones. And they all cost at least 3 times, if not more, what this one does. And, you know, if I ever come across it, I might buy one. But, you know, they're very overly, I think they're just very proud of them. And I think they're great microphones for the money, but are they 3 times better than this one? 3 to 4 times better? No, they're not. But the point is, you want your dialogue to sound very radio quality because that's what the people are listening for. And if you can't produce that, you got problems. Now, just in me talking, I realize, you know, I need to take some of my own advice and watch my breathing. But once you kind of observe that this is something you do, you can kind of stop it by thinking about it. And then you think about it and you start doing it. And after a while, it becomes habit. Like I know if I need to stop and take a deep breath, I need to move my face about a foot away from the microphone so that you don't really hear it very loudly. And what you do hear, and that is picked up, is very faint so that the gate will chop it off. Because the way a gate works is anything below a certain threshold that you establish in your software or hardware is basically taken out. So the problem is, the good thing about a gate is if you have something, let's say your voice comes in right here, you can set a gate to chop off everything up until it comes into right here. So everything from here on up, it will pick up, but everything from here on down, everything from here on down, it will chop off. And that's great, but it'll kill a lot of stuff and make your dialogue better, as long as you're not too aggressive with it. But if you have a whole lot of loud breathings, like I'm talking like this and you know, it's going to pick that up. And, you know, 1 or 2 here and there is fine because that's how we naturally speak. Even in a vocal performance, it's not uncommon to leave some of the breath reflections in there because it sounds natural. If you get rid of them completely, it sounds like roboto pop music. It just does. Sometimes it works well to remove all the breaths, and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes what makes the performance is the breaths. Like take Michael Jackson. Get rid of the Shabooty Shimon, come on. That's what makes it. You know what I mean? That is all the other awesomeness that goes with it. But, you know, it's a matter of taste and, you know, doing it right. But when it comes to a radio broadcast, it's to be expected that there's going to be some breathiness. Like, okay, so yeah, not quite feeling it. That makes sense. But I was at the store the other day and like, I think that, like, that doesn't sound very pleasing to the ear. It's not natural. Nobody wants to hear that. So a lot of the things that will really help you run a better podcast will also help you be a better public speaker and just help you communicate with other people. Because if you listen back to your podcast and you are annoyed, then there's a very good chance that people are annoyed when they talk to you. And I know I have I'm not a very likable person. I am. A lot of people, I get along with people just fine. And it's not so much that I have a problem with getting along with people, but it's kind of like, there's not a whole lot of in between. Either you like me or you freaking hate me. You know what I mean? And I guess that's just how it is for some people, I suppose. But what I found is that as I've progressed myself as a leader in my career path, I've begun to realize that there's a lot of things that I do or used to do, I should say, and I really try to eliminate them that rub people the wrong way. Not everyone, but there's certain types of people that I rub the wrong way. And if I'm not careful, they're going to find me disrespectful. And so that's, I think it's not to say it's an easy fix, but if I observe it and I think I can fix it, then I should. And the same thing, kind of mentality that you would have, like running a business or dealing with people is the same kind of thing you need to have with running a podcast and your dialogue. If you think that something you're saying is annoying or the way you're saying it's annoying, it probably is. If it bothers you or you pick up on it, stop it. Like I noticed I had a tendency in my earlier ones to say and have these weird breathing episodes and then I'd move back in my seat and it'd pick it up and it was just it was so prevalent and so often that it would happen that I couldn't help but notice. And I tried to get better about it. And slowly but surely I got better about it to where now my dialogue is much better. Not to say it's professional, but it's a lot better, Another thing I realized is that for me personally, this is just me talking about myself. I have a tendency to talk faster than I can think, right? Just like I can also think faster than I can talk. The problem is your mind and your mouth need to be on the same speed. And that's easier said than done. So if you're someone for example, if you notice that you have a tendency to talk and then you run out of breath and you're going, there's a good chance that you're talking too fast. And I know I have a problem with this. And so I have to be very careful to not talk too fast. Even though I'm from Texas and us Texans tend to have a bit of a draw to our speech and a bit of a natural slur, the truth is not all of us talk like that, contrary to popular belief. I have a tendency to talk very fast because my mind just races. I think 100 miles an hour, but the problem is I can't talk that fast. And I try to, and then I can for about 30 seconds, and then I just crash and burn. So what I found a good trick is to be more poised when you talk. Hey, you've got time to fill. I try to make my episodes between 45 minutes and an hour long, because I figure the average commute's about 30 or so minutes, heaven forbid. I think it's a good idea to where you start a podcast and you finish it on the way to work, you finish it on the way home. Just like burping into a microphone is probably not the best thing, but I think it helps. From time to time, it's kind of amusing. And what was I talking about? Oh yeah, remaining poised. So one of the big things is making sure that you're in control of your episode. Don't let your episode take control of you. Remain poised, remain focused, keep an idea of what you're doing. If you have to, I've noticed some people do this and I don't, but I think it's a good idea, at least when you first get started, because anything you can do when you first get started to make your life easier and to keep you focused is a great thing. Like maybe make a little, get a sheet of paper and a pen out and make some bullet points, like a checklist of things that you're going to talk about in your episode. You know, let's first start here, go here, go here, go here, so that you don't miss anything. And it helps you not have to get to focus so hard on stuff so that you're not multitasking so much. And it helps keep you on track. You know, I think that's a good way to put it. It helps keep you on track and focused and helps give you a deadline. Another thing to consider is just the reality that practice makes perfect. And the more you do this, the better you'll get. So what I realized in the first 3 I did, they were so bad and took me so much time to edit that I just realized, you know what? I'm just going to delete these. I mean, I've got them saved somewhere, but I never published them. And then I did a few more and I realized they were okay. I could maybe publish, but I'm not going to do it. I think I did about 7 or 8 of them before I started publishing them. And some of them I went back and redid. Like pre-production was actually the first one I ever did. I forget what episode number. It was probably 14 or something. I forget. But that was actually the first episode I did. And I covered basically all the same bases in the second time around that I did the first time. But it is so much better than the first one. The first one was just bloody terrible. It was rambling. It wasn't very concise. The cohesiveness of it was bad. It just was all over the place. I rambled. It was hard to follow. It wasn't very easy to listen to, and my dialogue was bad. A lot of ums, and I said the same things over and over again. Like your transitions were very similar from one to the next, and number A and point number B. You know, it's just like, come on. And you can just tell it was an inexperienced thing. I was nervous and didn't have good control and focus over the episode, and the episode beat me. If you're out there to ride the horse, you got to make sure you're on top of the horse. The second the horse gets on you, you have problems, right? So I learned a lot from those. So a big takeaway I would say is go ahead and do a few of them. Anticipate that the first 5 episodes you do are not going to make it, right? They are a learning experience for you, and that practice makes perfect and you will get better. But anticipate that those are just rough. They're just practices. You know, you do it a few times and you're like, okay, that's fine. You know, and it is kind of fun to go back to episode 1 of a podcast versus episode 200 and just see how far something has progressed. It is something pretty cool. But what I've noticed is that initially podcasts start out a little bit rough and kind of raw and a kind of short, and then they end up very polished, very good sounding, very entertaining, and very long, you know? And so that's kind of the natural progression that a lot of podcasts take. Some of these things are real long. And, you know, to each their own, but you got to figure out the formula, and you're not going to figure out the formula that works if you don't try it. Yeah, I mean, you can think about it all you want, brainstorm it, you know, all you want, play devil's advocate, but until you do it, you really don't know. So I highly recommend get out there, just do it. Just do it, brainstorm, get it, make a little checklist of bullet points of topics you're going to do, and go through it. Do it. Listen back to it objectively, and you'll notice it's probably pretty bad. Mine was pretty bad. You know, I still think I do pretty bad sometimes, you know, although I've found it, you know, with practice makes perfection. But the big thing to take away here is that you're going to gain a skill out of it by doing it. I feel so much more comfortable getting up in front of a group of people and talking after producing a podcast because I have been forced to put myself under a microscope and listen to my own dialogue and how I speak. It forces you to realize that, man, I sure sound annoying. You know what I mean? Like if you were to take yourself out of your body and have an out of body and mind experience and be in the audience listening in on what you're saying, how would you feel about it? You know, would you be bored? Are you paying attention? And that's what I began to realize. There's a lot of times where, because the way I say things and articulate, and just my lack of preparedness, there's a lot of parts and episodes where I just kind of fade away and then I come back, you know? And I think that's going to happen. If you're going to produce a, 45-minute to an hour-long podcast, people are going to kind of zone in and out. That's just how it is. You know, our attention spans are just not that long. But you have to do a few things to kind of keep people interested. And that's where kind of the art of inflection, how you speak really makes a difference. So if the whole entire time you talk like this, I don't care how much you know, because I'm going to crash into a ditch listening to your podcast. And unfortunately, that's how most of them are, man. I'm serious. Like, most of the podcasts I hear are, from not like big people. Like, sure, the Joe Rogan experience is a little different. Somebody like what's that guy? Dave. Oh, come on. Why can't I remember the big financial Dave Ramsey? Yeah, David Ramsey, whatever. Dave Ramsey. I love listening. Granted, his is more of a show, but I like listening to his stuff. I don't look at him because he's not much to look at, and looking at him doesn't really change things. As long as I can hear it, I'm fine. But he's another example of somebody who uses the YouTube platform to their advantage, and it works great for him. But even though you have the option of looking at it, which sometimes I do, generally, if I'm in my car, I don't need to look at it. I just need to hear it with my Bluetooth headset, and I'm fine. But the point is, these guys are interesting to listen to. They do a lot, and they really take command. You can tell that these people are good public speakers. Obviously, Dave Ramsey is a very good public speaker, and that's that's kind of where he really shines, And naturally, he does a pretty good job behind the microphone. But he's very believable. He's very passionate about what he talks about, and he's not acting. He believes this stuff, But Joe Rogan, they believe this stuff. They're very good behind the microphone, and they're very good public speakers. And the truth is, if you can do one, you can do the other. But one thing is that you don't have the luxury of behind a microphone is body language goes completely by the wayside, which is a pro and a con. And I'll drink to that one. The most basic form of communication is body language. I'd say the most high tech is written, right? And in between that is speech. That's why, like text messages, there's an art to writing text messages and emails to where they don't sound like personal or they don't sound emotional. And I tell you, text messages are very hard to capture a tone or maintain the tone you want so that they come across the way you intend them to. And the same can be said of the spoken word. The spoken word and the written word are very different, but the spoken word versus spoken word with body language are two very different things. And that's where I think the whole formula for having like a YouTube channel is kind of nice, because if your spoken word matches with your body language, you can be very convincing. And it's kind of like you don't necessarily have to look at it at all times, because the body language will kind of represent and kind of follow suit with the spoken word. So something I've kind of toyed with is, should I try to get myself on YouTube? I don't know. I think that this concept has, kind of falls in line with, Podcast Learnings Part 2, because you have to kind of figure out, this is really more about figuring out the formula of your show, how things are going to be, and more importantly, how you're going to execute it as the person behind the mic. But one thing about doing video is it adds a whole extra dimension that you have to take into consideration. I mean, realistically, all you'd have to do is, I could do exactly what I'm doing now and just put my cell phone camera out, or I've got several digital cameras. It's not a big deal. But let's just say, for the sake of easiness, I put my cell phone camera out, get some good light, shine it on me, and record this with my cell phone. Just kind of match up the, set a little like click so that I can match up the dialogue and the video to the same time point, so that it doesn't sound like I'm a Godzilla, where my mouth moves and then 5 seconds later, it's Godzilla. Rah, 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 rah. Cause it's funny and it's comical, but that's not something that people want to deal with, for much more than about 10 seconds. It always bothers me when video doesn't sync up with the audio. It really bothers me. But that's just how it goes. But there's another kind of catch-22 to this. Like, rendering 100 or so megabyte audio files takes, 3 or so minutes with Reaper, but then uploading it to your website, that's something that not everyone realizes is your download speeds are way faster than your upload speeds, right? So it takes a good 10 plus minutes for me to upload, easily, I'd say about 10 minutes for me to upload an episode onto my host. What do you call it? My host site where I store my sites and then link it to my website. It takes a good time to upload it. And if you were to, it would take me like an hour to upload a video. That's an hour. I mean, I couldn't even imagine how long it would take for it just to render it. If I had to change the format of it to make it fit with YouTube, that would take a long time. And then to upload it onto the YouTube would take, oh my God, but generally it's the kind of thing you make sure you turn your screensaver off and your sleep mode off, and you just click render and, or, upload and then walk away. You don't just sit there and look at it clearly. So it's doable. And it's something I've thought about because I think the YouTube channel is really a great medium for podcasters, because it gives you the chance to really add to the total spectrum by bringing body language in and an image behind the voice. But the truth is, oops, I just knocked my microphone over almost. But the truth is, I think the video side of things helps initially, but shortly thereafter, nobody's listening to it, or watching it, I should say. They're just listening to what they have to say. I know by now, I don't need to watch Dave Ramsey because I know what he's going to do. He's going to be behind the desk. He's going to do the same action, the same body language, the same hand gestures. I can get it. Whatever he's doing with his voice, I can see it in my head. But, I may not have seen that had I not seen the YouTube videos. Maybe it wouldn't have been so convincing and entertaining without the YouTube videos that I'd seen behind it. So definitely, I think there's something to be said about trying to use, video and a visual media side to it. But the other problem is it adds a whole lot of extra work. And, what I think you got to distinguish to yourself is the juice really worth the squeeze, In this particular instance, I don't think it is for me. Maybe as things get bigger and I've got more demand, maybe I'll add more video to it. But to me, it's more about just being able to do this and get them in and get them out. It's a factory of things. And at the point that I have to start adding video, it takes so much more effort and processing power and broadband to do that to me, it's not really worth it, because I don't think I'm good looking enough to where you really need to see me. Although, maybe it would help things, but the way I look at it is, if I do a good enough job of narrating and being entertaining and really perfecting as much as I can the art of speaking, you should be able to kind of figure out who I am, But the weird thing is, once you see a person and you hear their voice and contacts, you will draw that recognition for the rest of your life. Like, case in point, let me drink to this, but case in point, if you listen to somebody sing a song on the radio, right, and you imagine what they look like, you will just about always be wrong, right? Every time I hear a singer and then how they sound, and then I see them in real life, I'm never even close. And that's kind of a pro and a con, For example, because you've never seen me in real life, you don't know what I look like. For all I know, I could be some fat old bald guy, or some little Filipino, or some giant Mexican guy, or some really tall, skinny black guy, or a Chinese person that looks like a sumo wrestler, a Japanese sumo wrestler. You have no idea. All you know about me is what I've told you. So you hear my voice and you kind of draw conclusions based on that and how I talk, the words I use, the fact that I tell you I'm from Houston, Texas area, and that kind of thing. You hear my accent, however great or small it might be, compared to what you're accustomed to from where you live, and you draw your own conclusion, and your mind kind of makes its own little picture of me. But if you were to actually see it, it might completely shatter your perception of it, and it might actually make it worse. if you were to actually see me in real life and find out that I'm some little Chinese guy, it might completely blow your mind and you just can't deal with it anymore. Now, I'm not a little Chinese guy, but the point is, perhaps there is some advantage by the fact that I am not visual. Have you ever heard the old running joke that, yeah, that guy's got a face for radio? You know what I mean? Sometimes it's better to be heard but not seen, right? And I think that's going to vary from one person to the other. And there's some pros and cons to each format you choose. But I found that for the time being, it is way easier to just be a voice behind a microphone and not a picture behind a video screen, because it's just a lot less work that goes into it. But it does kind of force you to need to be a little bit better at your verbal communication behind the microphone, or else that's all you got. You don't have any visual cues. It's all based on sound. That's the only sense you get when you listen to my program. And so everything that you gather is based on how you feel about when you listen and how your ears determine how you feel about something. I feel like I'm kind of falling off the edge of a cliff here. So I think I'm going to stop it here. Hell, we're 52 minutes in or so like that. So I think that's a good point. But clearly I'm not done. I'm just I'm just scratching the surface here. But I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up with another episode where I'm going to get into kind of the nuts and bolts of, not so much how to act on behind a pause and sort of the theory behind it, but more so, what you need to do to set up a podcast as far as, web hosting and that kind of stuff, what kind of gear you need, all that kind of stuff. So I think if I were to come up with another one, I think that would be a good spot to kind of go through. Because in the first, episode of Podcast Learnings, I talked about just podcasts in general, as poorly as I did. The second one, this one, I think I did a little bit better job of kind of talking about what you have to do to just kind of come up with an idea and some of the things you need to think about when producing content for your podcast, and how, especially if you're the one doing it. So I think in the next one, which I'll probably do right after this, since I need to stay up till an ungodly hour anyways, I'll probably talk about more the nuts and bolts of what you need to do to host a podcast, as far as internet space and just websites and the equipment you need and how to do it, right? It's not so much the why, this is the how that I'll kind of get into in the next one of part 3. But until then, I appreciate you listening to Podcast Learnings Part 2 on the Working Musicians Podcast. I am your ever so faithful servant and host, Dris Organica. I, of course, always thank Miller High Life, and in this case, also some coffee, a little Maxwell House coffee, for helping this episode come to life, because I'm double fisting here. And as always, bye-bye.